Welcome back. As I continue to study chess, one thing I've decided to do in order to improve is to make a list of, identify my weaknesses. And I have begun doing that off camera. But one of the weaknesses that I have mentioned in some of my previous self-analysis videos is my inability to correctly analyze a position during a game. And hand in hand with that is picking the right move. If you analyze with an engine, with Stockfish, any of the other engines that are available, you know that it picks suggested moves, your 3 or 4, depending on what you select, best moves. Now, sometimes you'll notice that the engine has 3 or 4 moves that are all about the same. One maybe have a slight more advantage than another. And other times there's just one move that's good, and any other move gives the opponent the advantage, or blunders away your advantage. Now in this position there are multiple moves that the engine is suggesting for me, none too much worse than the others. And I did analyze this on multiple websites just to be sure. But during the game, I analyzed it entirely differently for myself. I had time left. I had 3 minutes left at this point in a 10-minute rapid game. And my opponent had about a minute more than I did. But I analyzed this position as my opponent having a slight advantage. And in the game, I'll tell you why. My opponent has 2 passed pawns. One is currently protected, but won't be if it advances. But my king is stuck defending, or keeping this passed pawn from advancing. It has to stay close to the h-file because of this passed pawn here. I can't move forward toward that pawn because obviously that pawn guards this square. I can't move sideways because this pawn guards those 2 squares. And I thought I couldn't, or at least shouldn't, take this pawn because there would be a discovered check here. The king cannot move to the e-file because of my rook, but it can move to one of these places, and then I would be in a discovered check and have to move. As it turned out, that's not actually that bad for me if I had taken, because yes, the king could move out of the way, I would be in check, but then I just go here and I'm guarding against that pawn, and I still have a slight advantage. And here I had a slight advantage but didn't realize it. Now, analyzing it in hindsight is different than analyzing it during the game. In hindsight, I have 2 connected passed pawns, and that's a pretty big advantage. Their king doesn't have too many squares to go, and as long as I don't take this pawn, they can't check me. I can easily slide over to keep control of the open c-file, which I was there a minute ago. I can advance my b-pawn to effectively lock these 2 pawns in place. They couldn't advance because I would capture and I would have another passed pawn. But I think right now my biggest strength is probably these 2 passed pawns and the fact that my opponent can't currently advance their passed pawns. Regardless, I'll make the engine visible here. You'll see what the candidate moves are that the Stockfish has chosen. One is stronger than the rest, it says. And Lichess agreed that putting the rook back here on c1 to control the c-file, to threaten check, to get out of the way of my 2 passed pawns, whatever the case may be, that was the best move by far. It's now changed its mind and says that this is not the second best move, but a5 is, which would also serve the purpose of keeping these pawns from advancing. But because I evaluated this position as me being behind, I went for what I thought of as a desperado move, which was here. Now that was the reason I moved the rook over to the e-file in the first place, was saying I can get in front of this king. It's safe here, guarded by a pawn. Then I can come here on a subsequent move and say check, guarded by this pawn, because these 2 pawns are awesome right now, guarding these 2 squares. So my rook is safe here, my rook is safe here. And if and when the king moves out of the way, we can do a rook trade, or depending on which way the king moved, I can pick off this pawn. And then this one when the time comes, especially after the rook trade, and then I'm in a good position to keep that one from advancing. But I didn't realize that my move that I made was really, really bad. You'll see the evaluation bar just fall there. The reason it's bad is that white can choose one particular move. Now, this is one of those situations that I was talking about where the engine gives you the three best moves, but only one of them is good. If white doesn't find h6, then we're either drawn, if they go here, completely even according to the engine, or any other move gives the advantage back to me. And what they did was any other move, which gives the advantage back to me. Now I can trade rooks, or now I can go ahead with my plan of saying check and taking control of the F file, which then gives me this pawn. But right here, if my opponent had found h6, they would have had a huge advantage. Well, now it's saying over 4 points. A second ago it was 3 point something. So if they had done this, I now can't defend against both these pawns. Even if I do my desperado check, the king moves out of check. We can trade rooks here if we want. Let's say we trade rooks at this point. And now white only maintains the advantage if they push this pawn, not if they take the rook back. Because I can't get there, and I can't go here because of this pawn. And they're going to get a queen. However, at my level, I mean, people don't seem to play that way. What happened in the game was when I moved here, I think the opponent realized that possibly my plan was to come in here, so they offered the rook trade immediately. And my best move would have been to take it, but I went ahead with my plan. And I did maintain a slight advantage at this point. But the reason I maintained the slight advantage was because my opponent did not choose the best move when I went here. They did not push the h-pawn. So backing up to the original position is I need to be more careful at looking at these positions and seeing what the advantages of the position are and seeing what the disadvantages of the position are. I don't know in any universe that I would have chosen this candidate move as the best move. I don't know that I would have seen that as being so important. I don't like even if I didn't say check, even if I left that there and just moved an a pawn or something, and then my opponent did what could have been considered one of their better moves, I think I just would have taken this pawn. But let's say I did that. Then what my opponent should have done is get behind their h-pawn, which makes sense. That would have been their absolute best move, closest to equality. But anyway, I need to pay more attention to those principles. Let's see, where were we? Right here. That rooks belong on open files, and rooks belong behind passed pawns. So that's what I'm working on right now. If you have any advice, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Again, I am going to make some other videos talking about other weaknesses I'm trying to identify, and I have listed a few. This is one of mine, evaluating the position correctly during the game and then choosing the best move. I was fortunate here that when I did make my move that I had chosen, that my opponent didn't see the only move that gave them the advantage. And that happens around the 1100, 1000, 1200 level. Your opponent often won't see the one move that gives them the advantage. So in effect, they don't have an advantage here because they're not going to see that. But if they had, then I would have been in trouble. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you're doing as well as I am learning this game.